On the front side, a little bit over to the right, you should have quite a lot of margin available, I would think. And we're going to talk about Elizabethan idioms, and I should have had this in your notes, and for that I apologize. So we're just going to have you create a section that you can label this. And as soon as this popped up, I realized that was what I had forgotten. I had pulled up your notes and said, no, that's good. Let's hit print. What's an idiom again? Yeah, words taken non-literally. And of course, we've already talked about several of them: raining cats and dogs, dirt poor, upper crust, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. All of those are idioms. And so we want to kind of, okay. These are some of those idioms. Good, I squeeze that all in. So you can put it on the back too, I guess. I didn't realize there was a back. Thank you, Natalie. I didn't realize there was a back. I thought that the back was full. So, Braden Smith, give me one explanation of one idiom.
You're poor. If you were really poor, you're poor was full of dirt and stuff, and rich people will be looking for you're pouring.
Okay. All right. Matt Gerken, can you give me another one?
Cats and dogs when we got rain outside, and cats and dogs would fly.
Okay. And now if it's raining cats and dogs, that means, man, it's raining. Okay. Dax, give me another one.
Special.
Because you're going to just take, you're a linear group, aren't you? Okay. Okay. And why did they have hay in the house? Yep. Okay. And now we just, it's part of tradition, separating. Well, and we use thresholds now also to go from one building material to the next. Okay. Jared, give me another one. Which and then, and how did they display it? They hang it in their window and, hey, everybody, we have meat in our house. Okay. TJ, can you? I guess we're going to be taking them in order, but you don't have to. Nope. Yeah. All right. Peas porridge hot, peas porridge cold, peas porridge in the pot, 9 days old. Anyone?
Whenever they leave the bottom so that you need to add more.
Yeah. Okay, chewing the fat. Today means you visit, but
It'd be like inviting your neighbors over just to walk that
RVs.
Yeah.
And upper crust? Colton? Yep, and now upper crust means, what does upper crust today mean? You're Donald Trump worthy. Okay. All right. So now you guys can go back to your notes, and this will be on the back of the first page. Okay. So I know that most of you know the history behind the tomato, that in this country, Native Americans were eating tomatoes, but in Europe, they saw tomatoes as being poisonous. So nobody ate tomatoes in Europe. They grew them. They're just like, oh, don't eat them, they're poisonous. I want you to think about that in Italy. Pasta did not eat tomatoes. Okay? That just dropped as like, seriously? They did not eat tomatoes? They did not eat them because they believed that the tomato was actually the apple that Adam gave to Eve, which caused them to get thrown out of the Garden of Eden. Okay? So I know, but what actually made them sick was that they would put tomatoes on lead dishes. And we all know what happens if you eat lead. You die, right? So the acidity of the tomato with the lead dishes made people very, very sick and caused sometimes death. So for over 400 years, tomatoes were seen as poisonous. I can't even imagine. Marinara sauce did not come about until after the 1600s. They ate, what's the other one? Alfredo, like the white sauce, but no, not tomatoes. Anybody in here love tomatoes like me? I'm like, I can't believe I never ate them. And in fact, they came over to this country, and people were like watching Native Americans. I'm like, no, you're gonna die! And the first president to eat a tomato in public to dispel all myths concerning tomatoes was Thomas Jefferson. He had a big party. Tom was kind of a dry president. He wouldn't have been that funny. But if it would have been Andrew Jackson, he would have. But no, and he literally ate tomatoes in public to prove to people that it was okay to eat a tomato. And that was like 1805. And this is the 1600s. So just think of how long it took people to understand that you can eat a tomato.
When they grew, they still grew.
Yeah, they just threw them away. They thought they were weeds. They didn't grow them. They thought they were weeds. And they would like pull them out and seeds and That didn't mean they didn't use them to throw at people either. They did throw them because they had a great squish factor. Okay? So thinking about that lead, okay, they used to drink whiskey and ale in their lead cups. Okay? So the combination of that would knock people out for like days, and their pulse would lessen. This is the 1600s, and they think you died. They would bury you alive. Okay? And so they made sure that they were really dead. They would lay them out on top of a table, and they would hold a wake. And the word wake was like, okay, after 3 days, if they don't wake up, then they're really dead. So that's kind of why we have a 3-day waiting period. Just to make sure you're truly gone, we're going to lay you out on my table, and we're going to wait. You there, Matt? No? Okay, we can bury him. Let's just say that we buried him a little bit quicker. Okay? So a lot of times we would bury them, and graves and coffins were really expensive. And they also discovered that they used bones, so their grave robbing was very, very common in the Elizabethan era. And so grave robbers would go and steal things. They also suddenly decided that they found over 25 graves where there were scratch marks because the people that passed out, they were buried alive. So if you go to old cemeteries in Europe, there's bells above the grave, so people could ring a bell in case it's like, hey buddy, I'm here. You buried me too quick. And that's why you have the phrase saved by the bell. And also why some people would work the graveyard shift. Because your job would be to walk around the graveyard and make sure that no one was trying to get out. There's all kinds of scary crap for you right then and there. Huh?
That'd be a
Can you make do? And think about how many television shows that you have seen where somebody's been buried alive, you know, and you got to go find them. I know Bones and Monk and CSI, and I can think of all of those. Okay? So, a couple of things with death. All of that is related to lead. Okay? Because they made their dishes out of lead, and that lead poisoning combined with the tomato was deadly. Combine it with the whiskey, knock you out for days, and then they'd accidentally bury you. Okay, so a lot of our dead rituals come from the fact that we weren't really sure people were really dead. Okay? Ain't that a scary thought, huh? Okay. I know. This is the one of the tamer pictures. Most of you know about the bubonic plague. What are some other names for the bubonic plague? Black plague. Okay. And the millions of people. In fact, it decimated about a third of the world's population. Okay, some people believe it's as much as half of the population was wiped out during this time period. Now, if you think about it, the bubonic plague is spread by fleas, okay? Fleas that came off of animals. But if you guys put it all together, what have you learned about the hygiene habits of people in the Elizabethan era? It's no good, okay? And because it was no good, it perpetuated the disease, okay? If they would have just kind of went and dunked themselves a couple of times in the River Thames or the Danube or somewhere and took a little bit more care of their hygiene, the bubonic plague would not have spread like it did. I hit record, didn't I? Okay, good. I hope I'm not too far away. I hope you guys still heard me. Okay. So the thing is that the sores got really big, and then there was pus filled with them, and it smelled absolutely horrible. And so what they thought could do is that if they took ash from burn piles and put it around the sore, it would stop it from spreading. It didn't. So then they thought the way to dispose of the bodies was to burn the bodies. But they did try to stop it by putting ash around, like this person had a sore, they would have put ash around it. You guys also know something very famous from the bubonic plague. Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of cozy, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Ring around the rosy is you would put ash around the ring of your sword. A pocket full of posies, because it smelled horrible, you put flowers in your pocket. Okay? Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, and we all fall down, which means we all died.
So the Rosie was the Protestant.
Yep. So I bet you'll never sing that the same way ever again.
Is there another meaning for that song too?
Nope. Well, there is. That song came from the bubonic plague. Okay. Yeah. Or if mom died, or just became a song, you know, and kind of like a sick version. Okay. So we are now going to kind of leave our discussion of the Elizabethan era and go to talking a little bit about the bard, who is what his name. The word the bard means the poet. That's what, and he is called the bard. If you ever see this in any kind of piece of literature, you see the word bard, it refers to him. Now, Robert Frost, Emily Dickinson, William Walt Whitman, all of them are poets. But they, for some reason, don't get this name. He gets it. It's the bard is William Shakespeare. But before we move on to that, I want you to share at your tables tomatoes, lead, dead, and ring around the post, or bubonic plague. Set those in your brain. Lead, dead, tomatoes, and bubonic plague. So let's talk a little bit about Mr. Shakespeare here. Okay. So he was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, and it's upon Avon in England. Okay. They know he was born in April of 1564, but they don't actually know his birth date. They are guessing because of baptismal records that his birthday is believed and is always celebrated as April 23rd. Okay. What is ironic is he died on his birthday. So if you remember his birthday, I mean, like, boom, but he was born on April 23rd, he died on his birthday, okay? And so they're guessing because they found his baptismal records, okay?
Why do they think it's 3 days before?
Because it was common practice to baptize your child on the 3rd day. So they're born and then 3 days later. So they found the baptismal records, and so they're guessing that because of tradition that he was born 3 days before that. Okay? So we've already talked about the fact that his father was a glove maker. Gloves were important back then, okay? And it was from his family, his mom is the side of the money, okay? So they made a lot of money from the timber business, and so he also was the oldest of 8 children, okay? And remember that the infant mortality rate of that time period was extremely high. 3 out of 10 infants died before their first birthday. 50% of all children never saw their 12th birthday. Okay? And most people didn't live past their 40s. Okay? So it was a very sad time. They don't know a lot about his childhood. They know he went to school in Stratford-upon-Avon, but really we don't know much about anything. The only thing that we're guessing is that most of the schools were for boys. His mom had money, so he probably went to school, guessing. School at that time period was year-round, and you went from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Talk about year-round school. Okay? One of the things that you do need to jot down, okay, is that he was married. He married a woman much older than him, 8 years older than him. Her name was Anne Hathaway. If that name sounds familiar, there is a very famous actress by the name of Anne Hathaway. Not the same person. Okay? And she was pregnant when they got married. So, and their oldest child was born 6 months later. And they had 3 children together, Susanna, Hamnet, and Judith. And Hamnet, not Hamlet, Hamnet died at infancy. And much of his writing, you can tell when his son died and the impact that it had on him. Her home is still a landmark in England because her family was a little bit wealthier, so that her home actually stood, and so it's been preserved as part of Shakespeare's life. They did not have a happy marriage, though. Okay? In fact, he left the family in Stratford-upon-Avon and went to London. Okay? Some people say he left because he was seen poaching and stealing deer. Others people say that they left because they had a very unhappy marriage. Most people believe it was that reason. They were not well suited for each other. But regardless of the reason, he created what were called Lord Chamberlains Men. Okay? So jotting that down wherever you can see that. I think there's some blanks there for you. Lord Chamberlain's Men was a traveling acting troupe, and he was a very good actor, not just a good playwright. And a man by the name of Richard Burbage normally played the key roles. So many of the plays that he wrote with Richard Burbage in mind. It's like, oh, I'm going to write a play about a king. Richard will play that. Oh, I'm going to write a play about Othello. Oh, Richard's going to play that. So a lot of his plays have strong male actors. We're going to talk about why that was. But he had it with this particular man in mind. Okay? So he acted in them, he directed them, he wrote them, okay? And most of his Shakespeare's plays rhyme, okay? And they rhyme because it's easy to memorize a poem than it is, because that's why you guys all know your song lyrics. That's why you all can quote like your favorite children's book, you know, brown bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. Red bird, but you can do I love you forever, I love you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby will be. You can remember those things just like you guys can shoot off all kinds of songs. It's because you remember rhyme better than prose. Okay? King James became such a fan of Shakespeare's truth that the king actually started chucking out money. Okay? And then they changed it from Chamberlain's Men to the King's Men because he started paying it. What that started for England is that the kings and the queens started paying for the arts, which they still do today. In England and the United States, we don't do that. We don't have public sponsorship of the arts. If you have a really good play, you better make sure you're making some money on it, because if you're not, it's going to close. Right? In England, they have support of the arts, and that goes all the way back. Thank you, Shakespeare. Okay? Here is the globe. And it is octagonal. Definitely octagonal. Is that right? And there's no roof in the middle. Okay. So if you do an aerial shot, if you've done the extra credit, you know the extra credit is based on the globe. This is not the original globe. The original globe actually burned to the ground. Okay. They've just they rebuilt it in the 1700s. Sure, you don't care. I could tell you anything and you believe me. But they just finished a remodeling kind of thing where they tried to make it historically accurate. It's kind of not. I have a book over here. My niece just visited the Globe and she brought me back the what do you want to call it, the program. You get to learn a little bit about it. I thought that was sweet of her. She had no money. Okay. Here are some things about the plays. They had no lights, so the plays were always during the day. Okay, 2 o'clock actually, which would make people very angry because you're supposed to go to mass at 2 o'clock, which you're supposed to go to church. So people were like, the play or mass, the play or mass. I'm going to go to play. So the church got so that they didn't like theater because people were choosing to go to the theater than instead of going to church. Okay. Then you also could tell by the flags that they flew what kind of play there was. If there was a black flag, think about it as a tragedy. Everybody's going to die. Okay. If it's a red flag, it was going to be a history play, something like Julius Caesar or King Lear or Hamlet. If it was a white flag, it was comedy. Okay. So all you had to do is that was their billboard as you looked at the flags. It was like, oh, I'm not in the mood for a tragedy. I guess I'll go to church. Okay. Ooh, comedy. Church. Okay. So that's the way they kind of did that. Okay. You'll notice there's nothing in red. Women were not allowed in the plays. Right? It was seen as an unsavory atmosphere for women, so no women were allowed in a play. So Romeo and Juliet, obviously the other person was supposed to be a girl. Yeah, it wasn't. It was usually a young man of about ages of between 12 and 14 before their voices changed. Okay? And young men became very, very well rehearsed in playing girl parts. That's why in Romeo and Juliet and other plays, there were no great big kissing scenes. In fact, a lot of the love scenes, they're on opposite sides of the stage. Think of the famous balcony scene. You guys haven't even read Romeo and Juliet, but you know there's a balcony scene. Why do you think Juliet's up there and Romeo's down there? Because Juliet is actually a hymn. Okay? And that's literally why they did it. It's like, oh, Juliet, oh, Romeo, oh, Juliet, oh, Romeo. They're all the way apart. Okay? And it was actually, and that just was the way it was. Women weren't allowed in the theater. Okay? Here's some things I do know you need to jot in. He wrote 38 plays, 154 sonnets, which is another word for poems, and 2 epic poems. And like I said, he died on his birthday. Okay. He is actually buried in Holy Trinity Church, something that is also different from American churches. You were not buried in a graveyard. You were buried in the church, in the floor. So they dig up the floor and then put you down in there and you just walk over people. Okay? Yeah, there is a curse with Mr. Shakespeare's. Let's see. I'll go back here, but I want to. There it is. Here's his curse. Good friend, for Jesus' sake, forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones. Okay? Because, as I said earlier, grave robbing was very, very popular. He wanted, so he had it so that if you steal any part of me, you're going to be cursed. Well, some grave robbers didn't obey that, and they just found Shakespeare's head, they believe, the skull, about 10 years ago. So whether they were cursed or not, I have no idea. Okay. So when he died, this kind of tells you the relationship that he had with he and his wife, is that he left everything to his oldest child, Susanna, and not to his wife, who was still alive. And the only thing he left his wife with is what was called the second best bed. The second best bed would have been their marriage bed. The best bed was always given to the guests. So all she got was kind of like an old bed. So it was kind of an indication that, yeah, they weren't on good terms. Okay? Didn't really like each other. All right. So I need to go to, is it Shakespeare's World? Okay. Where are we at here? Not very far, right? Okay. And before I start this, let me see you guys.